Cassius Clay stepped off the plane from Rome with an Olympic gold medal hanging around his neck. At 18 years old, he was a national hero. Photographers surrounded him. Reporters shouted questions. His hometown had prepared a parade. But within 72 hours, that gold medal would be at the bottom of the Ohio River, and the man who threw it there would never be the same again. This is not a story about boxing. This is a story about the moment America told its champion he didn't belong. The flight home had been euphoric. Clay, loud, brash, and unapologetically confident, had spent the entire journey talking about his future. "I'm going to be the greatest heavyweight champion of all time," he told passengers. Some laughed, others were charmed. But when the plane hit turbulence over the Atlantic, something inside him shifted. He gripped the armrests. His knuckles turned white. For the first time in his life, the Louisville lip was silent. Years later, he would tell journalists that during that turbulence, he made a promise. If he survived, he would dedicate himself to something bigger than boxing. He didn't know what that was yet. But fate was about to show him. The engines roared. The cabin shook. An elderly woman across the aisle began praying. Clay closed his eyes and thought about his mother's words before he left. "Baby, you go over there and show them what we're made of." He had done that. He had won. So why did victory suddenly feel so fragile? When the turbulence passed, Clay opened his eyes and looked at the medal resting on his chest. Gold, heavy, real. He touched it with his fingertips, tracing the embossed Olympic rings. This was supposed to be the beginning of everything. Instead, it would mark the end of who he thought he was. Louisville welcomed him like a king. The mayor handed him a key to the city. Children waved American flags. Local newspapers ran front-page stories. "Our golden boy returns." Clay wore his gold medal everywhere, to the grocery store, to church, even to bed. His mother, Odessa, would later recall, "He slept with that thing on. He loved it more than anything." But there was something she didn't say publicly. She noticed the way white shopkeepers stared at the medal with suspicion, as if it were stolen. She saw how quickly smiles faded when Clay spoke too loudly, too confidently. She knew what was coming. Mothers always do. Louisville in 1960 was a city of two worlds. Downtown, white-owned businesses thrived with neon signs and polished storefronts. On the west side, black families lived under the shadow of segregation. Separate schools, separate water fountains, separate lives. Clay had grown up in this reality, but the Olympic glory had temporarily blinded him. He believed the gold medal was a shield, a proof of equality. He thought winning for America meant America would finally accept him. He was wrong. During those first few days home, Clay gave interviews to local radio stations. One host asked him, "Now that you've represented America on the world stage, do you feel more American?" Clay paused. The question felt like a trap, but he didn't know why yet. "I've always been American," he said carefully. "This medal proves it." The host smiled. "Well, we're proud to have you back where you belong." Where you belong. The phrase lingered in Clay's mind long after the interview ended. Where did he belong? In the ring? In the West Side? In America? Or nowhere at all? 3 days after his return, Clay decided to celebrate. He invited his younger brother, Rudy, and his trainer, Fred Stoner, to a downtown diner called the White Castle. It wasn't actually a White Castle franchise, but locals called it that because of its strict whites-only policy. Clay either didn't know this or didn't care. He was 18, invincible, and wearing proof of his greatness around his neck. "Let's go downtown," he told Rudy. "I want to eat somewhere nice for once." Rudy hesitated. "You sure about this?" "I'm an Olympic champion," Clay said, grinning. "What are they going to do?" They walked in at 6 p.m. The restaurant was half empty. A jukebox played Only the Lonely by Roy Orbison. The smell of fried chicken and coffee filled the air. Red leather booths lined the walls. A ceiling fan rotated slowly, pushing warm air in lazy circles. Clay walked to the counter, still wearing his gold medal, and sat down on a stool. Rudy sat beside him. Fred Stoner hesitated at the door, his instincts screaming danger. A waitress, middle-aged, blonde, tired, approached with a notepad. She had the face of someone who had worked too many double shifts and stopped caring about people a long time ago. She looked at the medal, then at Clay's face, then back at the medal. Her expression didn't change. "We don't serve Negroes here," she said flatly. Clay smiled. He thought it was a joke. Maybe she didn't recognize him. Maybe she didn't understand. "Ma'am, I'm Cassius Clay. I just won a gold medal for this country, in Rome, for America." She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She barely seemed human. "I don't care if you won 10 gold medals. We don't serve your kind." The restaurant went silent. Every head turned. Forks stopped midair. Coffee cups froze halfway to mouths. The jukebox kept playing, oblivious to the suffocating tension. Clay's smile faded like paint peeling off a wall. He looked at his brother. Rudy's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were bloodless. Fred Stoner walked over and put a hand on Clay's shoulder. "Let's go, champ." But Clay didn't move. He couldn't. Something inside him had snapped, not violently, but quietly, like a bone breaking underwater. He stared at the waitress, then at the medal on his chest, then back at her. "I fought for this country," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I represented America on the biggest stage in the world." "Not here, you didn't," she replied, turning away to refill someone's coffee. They left without a word. But as they stepped outside into the humid September air, a white man in a leather jacket followed them. He was drunk, aggressive, and looking for a fight. His breath reeked of whiskey. His eyes were red and wild. "You think you're something special, boy?" He spat, his voice slurred. "That medal don't mean nothing here. You're still just a Negro." Clay turned to face him. His fists tightened instinctively, years of training taking over. His brother Rudy stepped forward, ready to swing, but Fred Stoner grabbed them both. "Not here, not now. They'll lynch us before morning." The man laughed, a wet, ugly sound, and stumbled back inside. Clay stood on the sidewalk, trembling, not from fear, from rage, from humiliation, from the crushing realization that no matter what he achieved, no matter how high he climbed, there would always be a door he couldn't enter. There would always be a waitress who saw him as less than human. There would always be a drunk man who felt superior simply because of the color of his skin. For the first time in his life, Cassius Clay understood the lie he had been sold, that excellence equals acceptance, that if you work hard enough, if you win big enough, if you make them proud enough, they will finally see you as equal. But standing on that sidewalk, the gold medal heavy against his chest, he realized the truth. They would never see him as equal. Not because of who he was, but because of what they were. They walked in silence to the 2nd Street Bridge. It was a quiet night. The Ohio River flowed black beneath them, its surface reflecting the moon like a shattered mirror. Clay stopped in the middle of the bridge and leaned against the railing. Below, the water moved slow and indifferent, carrying away trash and secrets. Rudy lit a cigarette, his hands shaking. "We should have fought back." "And then what?" Fred Stoner said. "You think the police would have taken our side?" Clay wasn't listening. He was staring at the medal, turning it over in his hands. The gold felt cold now, lifeless. He remembered standing on the podium in Rome, hand over heart, tears streaming down his face as the American anthem played. He had believed in that moment. He had believed in the flag, in the country, in the idea that merit mattered more than melanin. "This don't mean nothing," he whispered. "Don't do it," Rudy said, suddenly understanding. But Clay's hand was already moving. He held the medal up to the streetlight one last time. The gold glinted in the darkness, catching the moon, and for a moment it looked almost alive. Then he threw it as far as he could. It spun through the air in a perfect arc, catching the light one last time, and then, splash, it disappeared into the river. The sound echoed across the water. Final, irreversible. Fred Stoner stared in shock. "You just threw away a piece of history." Clay looked at him, his eyes wet with tears, but his jaw set firm. "Nah, I just threw away a lie." Rudy walked to the edge and looked down at the black water. "What are you gonna tell Mama?" "The truth," Clay said, "that I'm done fighting for people who don't see me as human." They stood there for a long time, three black men on a bridge, watching the river carry away a dream. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. Life moved forward, but something essential had changed. Cassius Clay, the boy who wanted America's approval, had drowned in that river. Someone else was beginning to emerge. That night, Clay didn't go home. He walked the streets of Louisville until dawn. He passed churches where his people prayed for deliverance. He passed barber shops where old men argued about politics they weren't allowed to vote on. He passed liquor stores where young men drowned their futures in cheap bottles. He saw black men sitting on porches, staring at nothing, their eyes empty of hope. He saw children playing in alleys with broken toys. He saw a world that had given him everything and nothing. When he finally returned home, the sun was rising. His mother was in the kitchen, frying eggs and humming a gospel hymn. She saw the empty space on his chest and knew immediately. She didn't ask, she didn't scold. She just turned off the stove and held him. "They don't want us, Mama," he said, his voice cracking. She pulled back and looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not her baby boy, but a man standing on the edge of something enormous. "Then you make them see us," she replied. "Not by begging, not by proving, by being so undeniable they have no choice." That conversation lasted 10 minutes, but it planted a seed that would grow into a revolution. Within weeks, Clay met Malcolm X at a Nation of Islam meeting in Detroit. Within months, he joined the movement and began questioning everything he'd been taught about America. Within years, he changed his name to Muhammad Ali and refused to fight in Vietnam, declaring, "No Viet Cong ever called me Negro." The world called him a traitor. The government stripped him of his titles. White America turned its back. But Ali never forgot that night on the bridge. In every interview where he was called arrogant, in every press conference where he was told to be grateful, in every moment where he was expected to bow, he remembered the waitress, the drunk man, and the river. In interviews decades later, he would say, "Throwing away that medal was the best thing I ever did. because I stopped fighting for their approval and started fighting for my people. But here's the twist that nobody talks about. The medal was never actually thrown into the river. That's what Clay told the press for years. The truth is more complicated and more human. In 1996, Ali was chosen to light the Olympic torch in Atlanta. As he stood before the world, his hands trembling from Parkinson's, the Olympic Committee presented him with a replacement gold medal. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears streamed down Ali's face. Muhammad Ali, the man who refused to be broken, stood there shaking, holding a piece of gold that meant everything and nothing. Later, a journalist asked him, "Did you really throw the original medal into the river?" Ali smiled, that famous, knowing smile. "Does it matter?" And that's when the truth came out. The original medal wasn't in the river. It had been lost, or perhaps hidden, somewhere in his childhood home. Some say his mother kept it in a drawer, unable to let it go. Others say he gave it to a friend for safekeeping. The truth was never confirmed. Ali took the secret to his grave. But the story of the bridge? That was real. The humiliation at the diner? Real. The decision to become something more than a boxer? Real. Ali understood something profound that night. Truth isn't always about facts. Truth is about the lesson. And the lesson was this: dignity cannot be given by others. It must be claimed by yourself. The medal itself was irrelevant. What mattered was the choice to reject a world that demanded gratitude for scraps. The story of the gold medal is not about a piece of metal. It's about a young man who believed his achievements would protect him and learned that no trophy, no title, no accomplishment can shield you from a world that refuses to see you as human. But instead of breaking him, that lesson forged him into something unbreakable. Muhammad Ali became the greatest not because of what he won in the ring, but because of what he refused to accept outside of it. He refused to be silent. He refused to be grateful for crumbs from the table. He refused to let anyone, waitresses, presidents, or entire governments, define his worth. And it all started on a bridge in Louisville with a gold medal, a lie, and a choice. In 2016, a memorial plaque was installed on the 2nd Street Bridge. It reads, "On this spot, a champion threw away a medal and found his voice. Tourists visit it daily. They take photos. They tell their children the story. But few understand the real weight of that moment. They see the plaque and think, what a powerful symbol. They don't see the 18-year-old boy standing there at 2 a.m., weeping, wondering if he'd just destroyed his future. But that's the thing about legends. We remember the moment. We forget the terror that came before it. Because Muhammad Ali didn't just throw away a medal that night. He threw away the idea that he needed anyone's permission to be great. He threw away the belief that America's love was worth chasing. He threw away the version of himself that wanted to belong more than he wanted to be free. And in doing so, he became the most important athlete of the 20th century. Not because he was the best boxer, but because he was the bravest human. That's the legacy that can never be drowned. That's the truth that survives every lie. The medal is gone. The man is eternal.